Being compliant is just straightforward. Being maliciously compliant? Well, that's another story. Welcome to this episode of Malicious Compliance.
Our first one is from Theory of Relative T, titled, "My appointment was cancelled for being 5 minutes late? I guess I have to reschedule." This happened about 4 years ago when I got a summer job at my university. The job was working for professors that I had worked with before, and they asked me last minute to teach a summer workshop to 9th and 10th graders. So with less than 2 weeks before the camp starts, I have a bunch of paperwork to do first, including clearances that say I can work with kids. One of these is an official FBI check for which they need my fingerprints. Well, I needed to do the physical fingerprinting right away in order to get the result in time. Luckily, I was able to book a fingerprinting appointment for that Friday, booked 24 hours in advance as required, which would be just barely enough time to get the result. That Friday I catch the subway to campus and it's atrociously slow. I'll admit, I should have planned for this. The subway here is always behind. Anyway, I end up slightly late getting to campus, so I literally run to the police station and enter the front room at exactly 5 minutes after my appointment time. I know this because as I stepped through the door, I felt my phone buzz with what turned out to be a "your appointment has been cancelled" email. I speak to the security cop behind the bulletproof glass inside and I learn the appointment was cancelled after he checks my confirmation number. Apparently, they are automatically cancelled if you are not checked in within 5 minutes. Obviously, this is outrageous, but I'm usually a patient guy. I ask if I can book a new appointment. That's no good since it would have to be a Monday or later. So I grab a coffee from across the street and return to sit inside the police station and try to solve this with some Googling while I slip into a more and more frantic state of frustration. I can't find anywhere in the city that can fingerprint me before Monday. But here's what really pushed me over the edge. While I'm sitting there, at this point 30 minutes past my appointment time, someone else comes in for fingerprints. She shows up 5 minutes early. They take her in immediately, and she's out before her appointment was even scheduled to begin. The entire thing took her about 2 minutes. I point out to the cop behind the glass, as politely as I can, that clearly someone could see me right now because her appointment was already over. Why can't I have the current slot? But the cop insists that since my appointment was cancelled, my registration info was no longer in the system, and I can't be seen today. That's when the idea comes to me, and I confirm with him that showing up early is not a problem because they would have my appointment and registration info in the system. You see where I'm going with this. So I quietly sit back down and take out my phone. About 10 minutes later, I calmly approach him and say, "Hello, I have a new appointment to be fingerprinted. I'm about 72 hours early." I've never seen such an exasperated sigh in my life. But he checked my new confirmation number and everything was in order. Within 10 minutes, I was walking back out after getting fingerprinted. I find it kinda odd they delete your information if you're 5 minutes late. I mean, there should be like a 30-minute window or something. Things happen, traffic is bad. I mean, honestly, especially considering people are gonna have to re-register anyway, why not give the option to just reschedule the appointment? I'm glad you found a loophole though and got fingerprinted. This next one is by Whatever, titled, "You are not allowed to decide when to eat lunch." Got it, boss. Longtime lurker, first time poster. This was some time ago, probably early 2000s, but this event is burned into my brain. I'm sure over the years the story has been embellished a bit, but the core of the story is told exactly as it happened. I've worked in K-12 education technology for most of my 20+ years in my professional career. When I first started, I was the only technician for a small medium school district, 2,500 or so students. During the time of this event, the director of special education, SPED, was married to the superintendent. I reported to the business manager, who used to teach technology but was not a technical person. For the most part, I was left to do my work and was not overly micromanaged. So I got into a habit of taking my lunch whenever I felt like it, or even not at all. If I didn't take lunch and there was no pressing work, I would just leave a little early at the end of the day. Of course, I made sure all the schools were out before I left. As time goes on, I got in trouble for leaving early, so I would take my lunch whenever time permitted. Sometimes it was when there was only an hour left from work, sometimes not, but I would chill at my desk and just screw off. The others in the office where my desk was reported me for screwing off every afternoon. When I tried to explain to the business manager that I was taking my lunch, she says something to the effect of, "You can no longer take your lunch whenever you want. Your lunch is from 12 to 1. I say no problem, message received. So starting that day, no matter what I was doing, at 12 o'clock I would stop what I was doing and take my lunch. If I was at my desk, I would screw off. If I was at a school site, I would go sit in my car. Fast forward a month or two later, at about 11:30, the director of SPED calls and says his computer is not working and I need to come fix it right away. I say sure thing, on my way. When I get to his office, he says please fix it and heads off to a meeting. So I start in on removing all spyware he has managed to collect. At this time, all employees were local admins on their desktops. About a third of the way through, 12 o'clock hits. I stand up and walk out of his office and tell the secretary I'll be back in an hour. Out to my car I go, expecting a phone call any minute, and sure enough, 15 minutes in, I get a phone call from the business manager. Here's about how the call goes. The cast is the business manager who's my boss, and me. I hear you walked out of the SPED director's office without fixing his computer. Correct, it is my lunchtime. What do you mean? You couldn't fix his computer first? I could have, but you told me that I could not decide when my lunch break was, that I had to take my lunch from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. Wait, that's not what I meant. But that is what you said. If I stayed and worked on the computer and took my lunch at 1 o'clock or 1:30, I did not want to get in trouble for screwing off when I was supposed to be working. Okay, I'll call you back. She calls back about 15 minutes later, asking if I can please go in and finish his computer, and from now on, I can decide when the best time to take my lunch is. And it was never talked about again. It was nice being able to go home early when I didn't take my lunch again. I find it funny how she backtracked and then pretty much gave you back the ability to take lunch whenever when she realized she in fact did tell you a time and then she screwed up when you took your lunch. Absolutely beautiful. And our final one is from Sandy Peterson, titled Bait and Switch for a Tech Demo? So back in the day when I worked for Midsize Co., which was wholly owned by Giant Company, there was a big tech fest in Barcelona, and Giant Company was going to be there. Just a few days before the fest, they realized they needed someone from Midsize Co. to demonstrate our soon-to-be-released game, but it was less than a week away. So my producer came to me, I was the product's design lead, and said, "We really need you to go to Barcelona, but because of the short notice, we can't order you to go." I looked at him. He said, "Giant Company, guy that I liked says if you go, you can either A, fly first class, or B, take your wife." Well, the thought of scoring major karma with my wife, who speaks Spanish fluently, was the deal maker, and I said, "You bet," and immediately phoned my wife with the exciting news. Just 2 days before we were due to fly to Spain, some bean counter at Giant Company decided the deal they'd offered me was too good, so decided to walk back on the offer. It wasn't written down after all. My producer came to me and said I couldn't take my wife when I went, so I replied, "Okay then, I won't go." My producer grinned and went back to the bean counter, who was amazed that I'd walked it back. He thought for sure I'd want the trip to Spain, right? Now he had no one to demo the Midsize Co. product. No one at Giant Company could do it, and no one else at Midsize Co. would do it after hearing how they tried to screw me. The bean counter caved immediately, and me and my wifey got our trip to Barcelona. I sat in a big white room talking about tech specs to nerds all weekend, and wife got to see the city. I did manage to go out to dinner with her in the evenings. Squidding paella and tapas for the win. I'm told that since they had to book my wife's ticket the day we flew, it cost Giant Company an extra $1,000. Peanuts for them, but still. Of course, the source of the problem is that the bean counter had a false perspective. It's not a trip to Spain for me, it's a trip to a big white room full of other nerds for the weekend. If I can't even score wife points, it was absolutely not worth the trip. The malicious compliance part is that big companies said if you go, you get X, then rescinded X, so I complied by also rescinding the if you go part. You played your cards well with that. I'm glad you ended up getting them to give you what they promised you for going on the trip. I don't understand why they would get you to commit and then try to take it away in the first place. To me, that seems pretty low. Either way, you won and they didn't, so kudos. Alright, that's enough compliance for the day. Well, that wraps up this episode of Malicious Compliance. If you liked the video, please drop a like, share my content on all of your social media, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell. It really helps my channel out. And drop a comment down below. Thanks for watching, thanks to my patrons, have a great day and stay safe out there.